Hi everyone, here's an in-depth look at Watkins Glen Classic Boot in the Pro Mazda. The lap I'm showing is a 140.402. I did have a 0.3 but it had an off track, so I don't count that. Now you're making sure you get a clean exit out of the final corner to start the lap. You can lose a lot of time if you overcook this. The car will want to understeer at about the apex, so just get it nice and smooth and give yourself a good run onto the main straight. Now I'm braking at around the 100 meter marker. It sort of depends. A lot of people come into this corner and they try and aggressively brake late and then get the car in. But what they find is they're either having to overextend the car when it's unsettled under brakes and then the car will move around a bit, lose time on exit. Or they can't get it into the inside apex and then they'll lose a lot of time on exit too. So ideally you want to be on the brakes fairly early. What really matters most is carrying apex speed into this first inside apex and then launching the car up the hill, because you lose time down the whole hill if you don't get this inside apex right. So brake a little bit early, get off the brakes early, get into the apex, and then get a good run up the hill. So I am braking fairly early here. You do have to slowly get as late as you can on the brakes, because it's also important not to brake too early, but it's a fine line. Like the difference between a few meters can mean getting the apex or having to over brake and unsettle the car. And because around here you run such little wing for maximum speed, the car's on a knife edge. It needs a lot of turn for the long sweeping corners, but very low downforce for the long straights. So in this kind of middling stuff, it never really feels very planted. So I'm on the brakes and I'm trail braking in. I'm starting to turn and I haven't come off the brakes yet. That'll just plant the nose. You want to get it down into that inside apex and then just go hard on the throttle, push it out and get it back before the off track. Perfect. This turn 1 actually on this lap was my optimal run through that sector. It was pretty well spot on. Now up this back straight. Focusing on minimizing your line. You don't want to put any steering input you don't need to, so just slowly move the wheel to get the car over. Now at the end of the straight, you're wanting to go down into 5th and entering this right-hander from extremely far to the left. So down into 5th before getting to the apex and bring it in right into that inside line. Then let the car run out wide and touch that outside yellow line. So basically you're wanting to loop the corner and touch both yellow lines on the inside and on that outside of the second apex. You also want to use this bit of off track here. The track nicely opens up at the end, and if you can get the car out on it a little bit, it just gives you that tiny bit of extra track to take a little bit more angle from the outside to reduce the turn. And again, getting this tight inside apex is important, but through here, most importantly, you try not to unsettle the car. Because of how the car is set up around here with the wings, it's super easy to unsettle it basically everywhere. When you first start driving this track, you'll probably think the car's basically uncontrollable, like how am I going to control this? But over the laps, your rate of inputs just goes a bit slower. You start to take it a bit easier on the brake and a bit easier on the turn in, and the car stops sliding as much, and then the time comes to you. But particularly after coming from a track like Sebring, your initial rate of input will be much too high here. Now through here, you're wanting to enter from wide. Yeah, you enter from wide down 2 gears and you've got to bring the car into a tight apex, but you don't want to bring it into an early apex, so you've got to brake fairly late and then get the car turned. But again, because of how little rear wing you want, this can be quite a circus if you put on too much lock. So you've just got to really easily glide it into the inside apex, touch it, then get hard back on the throttle to push it out wide. But not too early because you don't want to go out in that outside grass. So enter from wide into a late apex, but make sure you get it on the inside curve, then hard back on the throttle. Now coming up here, you're braking it around the 100 meter marker and you're bringing it into a late apex. I want to get it tight in here. You want to get it close to this inside curb, but you also want to hold it on this, I guess this cambered bit of track as it kind of pulls the car through the corner. You don't want it getting up and off that. So you bring it into close inside curb, then getting on the throttle. Now the track opens up a little bit on exit and you can use that to give you a bit more runoff so you can get in the gas earlier. See, so I'm using this little bit of off track. You can carry a lot of speed through there and you just slowly build up to it, braking later, carrying more speed until you're basically throwing it in there and let the downforce stick it to the road. That quick double downshift sometimes in full speed will blow the gearbox. So in the races, because I'm in a time trial here, I wouldn't really worry about it so much. In a practice session, but in the races I wouldn't go quick with the downshifts. I'd probably shift to fourth and then take third, probably a bit close to the apex. But because this is for a flat out lap, it doesn't matter. Now up here, you're braking at the 100 meter marker and you're trailing the brakes into the apex. And you want to get it close in here, but of course not hitting the inside curb. And then get hard on the throttle and push the car out. And then on entry here, braking in a straight line, then bringing it over and getting close to this inside curb again down in the third. You want to hug it, then slam the throttle on and push the car out in this runoff. It's important to get in the throttle early here as you go full throttle through this whole next section. I'll do that in full speed. And just flat through this next section, just taking a tight line, don't lift. Now I want to go down one gear under braking for this final corner. Now this is quite a hard corner because particularly in low downforce trim, the car will want to sort of slow with all four wheels. It will understeer and oversteer at once if you overcook it. So you've got to bring it into a tight apex, but don't get in the throttle too early, as you don't want to induce the understeer. And if you get on the understeer too early, it will run out and grab an off track just on the exit there, which can ruin your whole lap. There's that, because you're using the outside curb, and then as the curb turns into track, there's a little bit of grass and it just catches you. That actually ruined my fastest lap. So just turning in, taking a fairly early apex as the car will understeer wide, and then harden the throttle. But don't get it too far out in that outside curb. Just get it controllable. You don't want to be using all that curb. And now we're just on a run to the line. That was a 44.02. It's a great track in this car. I think this is probably one of the most challenging tracks to really drive this car in the limit. It's just high speed, flowing corners, really long apexes, and I think pretty well what this car's built for. There wouldn't be too many cars in iRacing that could beat the Pro Mazda around a track like this. Here's a lap in fast motion.